what they said. Phil, Stephen, and Scott stay home and watch movies. In this case, Kubrick movies. We covered, um, well, I guess the early Kubrick movies, including The Killing and sort of Killer's Kiss and a few others. Went into Paths of Glory and Spartacus, and then Lolita and Doctor Strangelove. And I think it's fair to say that now, starting with 2001, which came out in 1968, we're kind of in I call it the third phase of Kubrick's career, really the final phase in some ways, in that, from here on in, his movies have a very definite Kubrickian sensibility. The other ones do in some ways as well. But I mean, this is the Stanley Kubrick that most people, I think, have spent years and decades arguing about, right? Every one
Yeah.
of his movies from 2001
Yeah.
onwards has been argued. Maybe Full Metal Jacket. I don't recall what the reception to that was at all at the time, and it's a little bit of a blank spot to me. I did rewatch it, but all the other ones have had their share of controversy for sure. So
Yeah.
2001, but go ahead, Phil. What were you gonna say?
I have to sneak in one quick thing that I forgot to say last time, which is, you know what I'm going to say, Stephen? My dad's cousin, Nick Dennis in Spartacus, who is also Stephen's third most watched actor ever.
No.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Highest rated.
Highest rated, sorry.
Yeah, they have two ways of doing it, and Sam Jackson's the one I've seen the most.
Because he's in Streetcar Named Desire. He's in Spartacus. He's in Kiss Me Deadly.
The only people ahead of him were like Japanese actors from Kurosawa.
Yeah, that's right.
He's got everybody else beat. Love Dick Dennis.
Did you ever meet him, Phil?
No, my dad tells this story. He used to tell it all the time. I don't know if he was exaggerating, but he and one of my other Greek relatives drove out to Hollywood to see him, and my dad insists that Nick or some producer said my dad should be in the movies.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So who knows whether that actually happened. Okay. That's all I wanted to say.
Okay, so Stephen, I was going to let you start off with 2001 just because I reread something that you did write about it. I got it through Letterboxd, but I assume it's on your blog as well. And I wasn't completely surprised to find out, given your age and what I know you're sort of into as a teenager and stuff, that you did, let's say, watch 2001 under the initial optimal conditions for some.
Yes, I did.
I'm just interested in general hearing about your early experiences of the movie, and it was obviously a phenomenon. So what do you recollect of it?
If I can add one thing first, in terms of Kubrick, as when he became Kubrick, I feel like he's somebody that the average film goer, they know his name, even now that he's gone. I think people, they say, "Oh, Stanley Kubrick, I've heard of him. Didn't he do?" And then whatever one sticks in their mind, Full Metal Jacket maybe, or 2001, which I think still sticks around. Anyway, yes, 2001. One of my memories of seeing it, I saw it many times in the 60s, late 60s, obviously, was a friend of mine went with his younger brother. So we would have been 16, 17. His brother would have been 12 or so. And we watched the whole movie. But when it gets to the Stargate, I remember my friend turning to his brother and saying, "Now, don't ask any questions. Just watch it. I hear from you."
Stargate is the light show part. When you call it Stargate, okay.
Because he knew that he knew two things. One is he knew that his little brother wanted to know what the hell. But I think he's also saying, neither do we. So don't bother asking us because we don't know either. And we don't care because we're fucked up, basically, And I still think that in many ways that is the time that I enjoyed the movie most. I certainly saw it the most times because we watched it multiple times. And it really lends itself to that. The way that it has what seems to be big themes, but they're so vague that you can insert anything into there. That's kind of a thing you do when you're high, and it's beautiful in so many ways. I mentioned, Scott, you said you read that the music, the soundtrack was like omnipresent. Everybody had that soundtrack, and we listened to it all the time. And you listen to Danube, and you go, "Oh, there's when the ship's doing this and that." We remember all the parts as we're watching it, just like it was a musical, like you were watching, I don't know, Oliver or something like that, and listening to the soundtrack. So it was very impressive. And it wasn't just that the music was great, but he used it in such an effective way that in many of those things, of course, they're classics. They have more meaning than just that movie. But I hear certain songs, I think, oh, that's that spaceship or whatever. All that I think is brilliant about 2001.
The soundtrack would be a mix of the classical and there's music that was written for the film, right? Like
Yeah,
this
but
Walter
that's-
Carlos?
No, that's Clockwork Orange. Walter
Clockwork
Carlos
Orange
is
and The
Clockwork
Shining,
Orange.
right? Or Wendy
Anyway,
Carlos, but The Shining.
as I recall, the 2001 soundtrack has electronic music, which we thought of as being classical. Didn't mean it was from Haydn or something. It just meant that it fit in with the other stuff. And it had what some of us wrestling fans think of as the Ric Flair theme song, also Sprock Zarathustra. And I don't think we knew Ric Flair yet in those days, but I can tell you that my son, a great Ric Flair fan, when he got married, he walked up the aisle to the ceremony, to the music, also Sprock Zarathustra. He wasn't thinking of 2001 when he did that because he did the Ric Flair strut.
Wow. Just to clear up on the music a little bit, none of the music that's actually in the movie was written for the movie. He actually, it's kind of a controversy within the, 2001 fanatics will be able to tell you this, but he actually commissioned some music from a composer and he didn't use a note of it. And he didn't tell the composer he wasn't using it. The composer went and saw the movie and he heard none of his music in it. But the music you're probably referring to, Stephen, is, it's sort of, I guess you could call it electronic. It's certainly weird. It's by this, like one of those kind of 20th century avant-garde composers. I don't know how to pronounce his first name, Giorgio Ligeti or Ligeti. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce his name, but he provides 2 or 3 songs, like that really weird ghostly stuff that you hear.
Yeah, that's what I was
Actually, that's actually him. And I don't know what instrumentation he used to compose it, but it is from the 20th century. And he said he liked how the music was used, but I think there was a bit of fight over the royalties. He didn't get properly paid for it or something. But there's nothing in that movie that was written to order for the movie. So
That surprises me.
But that just points out the excellence that with which Kubrick used it. He didn't have somebody to write it for him after they saw the picture. I never know. He picked that music based on what he had already filmed, or however. I don't suppose he filmed it for the music. It's one of the best things I've seen him do in any aspect of his filmmaking. And he's such a perfectionist in general. Even when I don't care for one of his movies, there's no denying the specificity of what he's doing. I just think it's a great match. And I disappeared up there.
yeah, I'll just quickly say one of my 3 or 4 favorite scenes in the movie probably is the scene with Frank Poole, the sort of secondary, well, the one who ends up dying, the astronaut on the way to Jupiter. And it's the first scene on the Discovery where he's jogging around, the wheel. And I don't even want to try and pronounce the composer's name. I got it written down, Khachaturian or something. It's a European, I think he's Russian or something. But it's just beautiful. The sound, the song, like it's this really mournful classical piece. And like it took me several times to see the movie before I realized what Kubrick was kind of doing to me. Like, because when you just think of the visuals of 2001, you sort of think of epic and grand. But here he's got this guy jogging around, with the gravity-less wheel or whatever in the spaceship. And the music is just like unbearably, like has this unbearable sadness to it. And I think that is like, to me, that's actually the genius of the movie. I mean, to me, it's a perfect movie. It's possibly my favorite movie ever, but that is really a key scene for me. Like he captures it so well by that use of music and that scene. And if you haven't seen 2001 or you've heard of it, you've seen this, I think you'd be quite surprised by how that plays out. Like it's not grand or epic at all in one sense. So.
I thought it was Keir Dullea who's doing the jogging.
No, it's the other guy,
Gary Lockwood.
Keir Dullea, I think, yeah. Gary Lockwood, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so I was going to start off. Here's the one thing that most interests me. First of all, I think it would be amazing I try to imagine sometimes what it would be like to go see that 1968, maybe not knowing that much about it and being thrust into the opening, you know, the dawn of man. Just how bizarre that would be. Like, what would you expect? You're coming out of Lolita and Doctor Strangelove, and maybe you have an idea of what kind of filmmaker Kubrick is, and you're sitting in the theater, you know, and it would just be incredible. And I say that as, you know, someone that doesn't love the movie like Scott does, but as I've said, it has grown to appreciate it. But here's the thing that really, really interests me more than anything. And I don't think there's a parallel for pop music albums. I always group them together. I always say the four big critics at the time, and this is probably not true. There are probably other critics that just as much influence or more. I mean, even if you wrote anonymously for Time, you had more influence probably. But I always think of Cale, Saris, Simon, and Kaufman, right? All four of them slammed 2001. I went, there's a site called Scraps. I've got a bookmark now, Scraps from the Loft. Have you ever heard of this site? I Googled the original reviews of all four of them, and all four original reviews are on this site. So they must, I don't know how they probably do it without permission. So maybe the site won't last, but I was able to look at all four reviews. Here's some. Cale called it trash masquerading as art, which I don't know, I guess for her that could be a compliment, but it's not. She didn't like it. Simon, a regrettable failure, though not a total one. Kaufman, major disappointment. Saris, thoroughly uninteresting failure.
There's a footnote to Saris though, but continue your story.
So when did, and I know they're not the only four critics in the world. I'm sure there were other daily critics who loved the film. But how does a film go from getting such negative reviews from four hugely influential critics to becoming this just beyond revered film by a whole generation of filmmakers like the Spielberg, Scorsese generation? That I can't think of a pop album that got slammed so hard. Yeah, like certainly, you know, you could find albums that weren't liked by this critic or that critic, but can you think of an album that maybe got slammed by Marcus, that Marcus hates, that Kirstagau hates, that Banks hated, that Marsh hates? Maybe some weird British album, but that, you know, ends up as I guess not hate, but I'm thinking maybe what's going on. I don't think any of them loved it, but there's no equivalent in pop music. So at what point did 2001 go from that to where it is now, which is it finishes third or fourth on the Sight and Sound poll, and it's, you know, about that high on the They Shoot Pictures, Don't They list. That's incredible.
If I can go back to my memories of what it was like when it came out, first off, I don't think we thought of it as Kubrick's next movie. I can't picture any directors in my mind. We heard of Alfred Hitchcock. Really, I don't think that mattered. We went because we heard it was good. We didn't read critics, but we heard it was good. We heard the album and we went and saw it. I really think that while I can imagine the critics didn't like it, but I don't think I knew that at the time, because I don't think I knew the name Pauline Kael in 1968, to be honest. So it's not so much why it was popular anyway, because we didn't care. What I think you've raised that's interesting is critics since then, like you say, it's one of the most highly regarded films amongst critics of any movie ever made.
Yeah.
And so what happened in the time frame, it puzzles me, not just for 2001, but for all of his movies, because I think it was when I was writing about The Shining and I looked it up, and you know, he's got like 5 or 6 movies in the top 100 of the greatest movies of all time. I personally, I find it mind-boggling, but it points to something about his work that people have connected to now, critics have connected to now. And I wish someone would explain it to me, because honestly, I don't get it.
Did he finish? Did he finish first on the They Shoot Pictures, Don't They list of directors, or would that be like Hitchcock or Godard?
I remember.
I think he must be close to first. I imagine Hitchcock or Wells. Hitchcock probably just because quantity too. I think it might go Hitchcock, then Kubrick, then maybe Wells or Fellini or something. Anyway, I don't know, I just found that interesting.
No, it is interesting. And I think the Saris footnote I mentioned is actually
Yeah.
maybe a little instructive. Saris, and I can show you what I've got it in here, this
Okay.
book on this voice film guide. It's not a bad book.
I have that
They
book.
reprint. Well, read Saris. They print 2 reviews by him because he
okay.
re-reviewed it in 1970. It's kind of funny. His opening paragraph is like, you know, I have to reevaluate my feelings about 2001, and I saw it with a friend who gave me a substance before that I've been told is stronger than oregano or something. So he got high himself and he went and watched it, and he proclaimed it. I don't know if he says masterpiece, but he does say something like it's a major work by a major artist, and he was wrong basically. But I think it's instructive because if you read, I've been reading a lot about 2001, just the background and stuff lately, and the initial screening was actually a bit of a disaster. And it's interesting to note that the version that Kale and probably Kaufman and Simon actually reviewed was a version that he ended up cutting 19 minutes out of. Like the reviews, and there were so many walkouts in the screening. It was at the Loew's Theater in New York, which is a huge theater, I think. And there were like, he had someone at the door counting, and there's over like 140 walkouts. And Rock Hudson apparently walked out and said, "Will someone explain to me what's going on?" So he actually cut some stuff out of the movie. He trimmed it down. But there's at least one other critic, I think, for a Los Angeles paper. And he's not one of the magazine critics, so you may never even heard of him. I think his name is Joseph Gemlins, but he's pretty big in LA, I think. Okay. So he did the same, he panned it. And then within a very close time frame, I think the same year or maybe early the next year, he went and watched it again. And I think I've actually read both reviews. You can find them online. I think he sort of said, we were all wrong about it. Like this movie, you need to go see this movie again. If you've only seen it once, it will have, you know, new rewards for you. But I think tied in with that, kind of what Stephen was saying, I think it's a movie that maybe it's a generational thing, because apparently like they didn't think the movie was going to do well at the box office at all. And what apparently saved it was the hippie generation. The word of mouth got out about how cool it was and the Stargate sequence and all that. And the next thing they know, they had huge lineups at the box office to see it. So I think maybe one theory, to answer your question, obviously I don't know, is just a younger generation of critics have come up. And I mean, Roger Ebert revered it. I read his 1968 review and he did love it.
Since you mentioned 2 critics who sort of had second thoughts and said, "Oh, I was wrong," underrated the film, Kaufman actually added an addendum to his review too, which was interesting because he talked about the quality of the letters he got protesting his review. He said, you know, when people take the time to write me letters, usually it's you're an idiot, you shouldn't be doing this, you're terrible, you're crazy. But these people would write thoughtful 2-page letters to him that seemed more disappointed that he didn't love the film than angry. And he was impressed by that. And even the drugs came up too. One of the letters told him that he suggested that he might want to watch the film high and it would be better. And he said something like, "That's probably true of any film." But he came close. He didn't reverse his opinion, but he did kind of soften in this addendum to his
right. And I can't imagine Kale would ever change her opinion about if she saw it again. Maybe, who knows? I mean, but she did see a version that had 20 additional minutes, right? Yeah. Which would have made it, I think, over a 3-hour movie, and that can tip you one way or the other, possibly. So,
here, I'll tell you just some other notes. Maybe this will get you guys talking about some stuff. Obviously, the film's interesting as prophecy when you watch it today. I mean, the one guy's basically doing a Zoom call with his daughter.
Yeah.
And Hal is kind of Alexa, right? You know, Hal do this, Hal do that. So it's pretty good on that front. Pretty good. That I want something stronger than that. The meaning, you know, I get the first section. I think that's very well done, the way it works up to the What are they?
So there's the Dawn of Man, then the
Yeah.
trip to the
What
moon.
are they? They're gorillas? No, what are they?
Oh, the apes. The apes.
Apes, sorry,
Yeah,
apes.
I didn't know.
When the ape grabs the tool, which becomes sort of a tool of violence, and that changes everything. All these animals are peacefully coexisting. I get that, but then the whole slab. I mean, yeah, it leaves me befuddled. Someone said, shouldn't worry about it. This slab is in your first scene, and then it shows up buried in the moon, which is taken as a sign of intelligence on other life, other planets, signs of intelligence on other planets, and then it shows up in that. I don't know what happens at the end with Keir Loew stepping out of the spaceship, and then aging, and then the slabs there. I don't know. Doesn't mean anything, or is it?
Well, I think as Stephen said, it's open-ended enough that, I mean, obviously it's there. I think it's there to signal some kind of transformation or something. And I don't think Kubrick does try and fill in those gaps. I will say about the slab or the monolith, a perfect example, I think, of Kubrick's brilliant direction here. And I'm sure a lot of other directors would handle it in a similar way, but a lot would not. Is I love the scene where the second part of the movie where they're going on the trip to the moon, and it's almost like just seems like a rote sort of trip. Oh, we're going to the moon and we're going to investigate this thing or whatever. It's not even a big deal or something.
Yeah.
But I love when they go, the way he directs the scene where they go on and they see the monolith, and they're obviously going to do sort of an examination of it. And the main guy, I think it's Haywood Floyd, he goes up to the monolith and he slowly touches it. A really bad director, a really ordinary director would have had something happen when he touched it. And I love that Kubrick doesn't do that, but then what happens like 30 seconds later is so terrifying. So he kind of walks back, and then they organize it's like a selfie around the monolith, I guess, to prove that they're actually, to prove that they were there, and they all this. And then they get the thing where they get the deafening sound from the monolith. Yeah. And they don't tell you, like, for years I used to watch that movie and think, I guess they all got killed. Like they got, like deafened and they died. But then I read some other things that says, no, it doesn't really suggest that at all. It's just, this loud piercing sound, but you don't know. So you have to fill in. Next thing you know, right after that scene, it's 18 months later, and some other astronauts are heading to Jupiter on a completely different mission. So it's a mystery. It's definitely a mystery.
The selfie is a good connection to the world now, and so is what's going on with Jeff Bezos and what's his name, Virgin guy,
Elon Musk. Oh, and all those guys.
Yeah, all of them. Yeah.
I'll just say no. Go ahead, Phil. You got.
No, I was just going to see if Stephen wanted to jump in.
Jump in. Yes. What happened to you, Stephen? Like, why did you end up losing your interest? Say your other point, but I am curious to know what changed for you.
I quit relying on drugs as a way. But while we're talking here, I'm thinking that whatever was going on specific to that generation of moviegoers, and I don't want to make a grand statement, but it's, within a year or two, we all went and saw El Topo 25 times, and El Topo is completely unintelligible, but we didn't care. It was so psychedelic. I think it was an openness to an unexplained stuff, and that didn't last very long. And it certainly didn't last for me, although I couldn't pinpoint when, but I get more frustrated now if I think there's some insular about the movies I'm watching. So I think that might be part of it. I do want to say one thing, because I'll harp on it from this point on. This is, I think, the first time where there's really crappy acting, but I also think it's very appropriate. The two astronauts, has been pointed out, Hal is way more human than the astronauts. They are totally characterless. And
I got to jump in. One of my notes was, I think Keir Loew actually gives a good performance in an odd sort of way.
I'm not saying that good or bad, although what I'm saying is that when you have a movie where the computer's the most human-like,
more charismatic,
yes, those astronauts, they're okay, doing a good job as actors, but their job is to act mundane,
Yeah.
and it makes sense. In future movies, I think that Kubrick has problems with his actors that aren't necessarily related to the stuff he's trying to do in 2001 that works. It works that those two astronauts are kind of emotionless in their way. It works that the computer gets our attention. It doesn't work for Clockwork Orange and on for me. But I want to say that now because I want to compliment him when I can. Let's put it that way.
So you're talking about two guys plus the three in hibernation who have been on this ship together, possibly for 2 years. Like it is the ultimate in the most like sort of both boring and profound. I mean, it becomes profound when the other four astronauts die and this guy's heading to Jupiter by himself. I mean, you can't have a more profound human situation than that. But they're so emotionless and almost don't say anything to each other except when they have to, because they probably in part because they've been on this ship heading to Jupiter for possibly like 2 years or something. Like it's just a weird, and I love the way he captures that. Like it is banal. There's no emotion, but I don't like it. It does just seem, Phil used the word appropriate or something. And I actually really like Keir Dulley's performance quite a bit.
Yeah.
And he loses his temper a couple times with Hal, but even, and the type of person who would be on that mission would, you'd almost think that'd have to be one of the criteria to do a mission like that you're not going to lose control if something happens. Like, and yeah, they've been superseded by the technology in terms of emotion, I guess. So.
It's funny when he gets caught in the lie by Hal about,
Yeah.
Hal knows they want to dismantle him. He disputes that, and then he explains how he knows. Did Dr. Haywood remind you, Dr. Haywood in the first?
Yeah.
Did he remind you of a famous director?
He reminded me of someone, and I couldn't think of who it was.
You know what I'm thinking of? He reminded me of David Lynch, believe it or not.
Oh, really?
Well, next time you watch it with that in mind.
It's interesting because reverse time.
Yeah.
Anachronistic, but interesting.
And you guys remember the Mad Men reference to 2001?
No, remind me.
And, mostly they kept Hollywood in view by Don would go to see some film. Well, nobody went to see 2001, but it's when they brought the computer into the advertising agency. And remember the crazy guy Ginsberg that ended up, he was in love with Elizabeth Moss.
Sort of younger guy or something.
Yeah,
right?
And he was flipped out by the computer. At one point, he's watching the computer technician talking to Jim Cutler, and he's just seeing their mouths moving. So he kind of becomes Hal. It was really good. It was a very subtle way to bring 2001 into Mad Men. And the other thing I was going to mention, I was watching it with the dog last night, who was fidgety as always, but it really actually in parts of it engaged the dog. The whole Dawn of Man sequence, it was like upright and watching it, and I turned the sound down because I thought it might be kind of disturbing, when some of the apes flip out. And some of those space shots are definitely beautiful, very meditative,
and I think as much as the visuals, the sounds in that movie, the breathing, the heavy breathing just totally gets to me every time. And when they have the one shot where Keir Dulley, when he, after the murder of Frank Poole, which I find which I compare to Fredo being murdered in Godfather 2, by the way, just for the like emotional impact it has on me. It's just such a like kind of weird blank loss or something. But when he's trying to get back into the ship, and it's almost a violent scene where he has to go through that chamber or something without his mask on, so he's not going to, and it's, he's hitting against the thing. He goes to total silence for that scene. And it is so effective the way he does that. Like, I do think the movie is genius. I don't mind using the word in this context. And I'm completely, every time I watch it, I'm more captivated than I was the last time. And I don't say that about very many movies. So
you've seen it in a theater, right, Scott?
Yeah. Well, my very first viewing was at about age 12 or 13. My brother took me, and you mentioned the Dawn of Man sequence. I mean, I didn't know anything about Kubrick then, but I did not know what to make of that at all. Like, I remember at first thinking, oh my God, I don't think I'm going to like this. Like, this just like, all about apes fighting. Like I just didn't get it at all. But then I was kind of awed by the spectacle of it. And yeah, and I've seen it since then, at least maybe once or twice in the theater. So
I think my next book, I got a making of 2001 book, one of those making of books. No, it's not that one. This is a more recent.
Yeah.
That looks good. This
That
is more
looks like
recent.
like an original, like from the time.
That's the one I have, Scott. That's
okay,
the one.
I'm sorry, I'm being a geeky here and showing off. This book was actually very important to me, though. This actually sort of
Wow.
through the 70s was something I bought it. It's one of the first used books I bought, I think. And it's designed by the same guy who did those McLuhan picture books, Jerome Agel. It's got like about 100 pictures in the middle. And it's got like the Mad Men comic. Like it's one of those great books where it's just like a scrapbook of stuff. And that was I think that had a lot to do with my subsequent enjoyment of the movie. I used to just pour over that when I was younger. I didn't read the whole thing, but just the parts that interested me anyway. So.
I've got the other one. I do plan to read that. Did you read it?
It's good. The only thing I found is it gets fairly technical for me, like technical about movie technology as much as anything else. So some parts I found a little hard to get into, but you learn a lot about the making of it and Kubrick and some of the conflicts.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
So we've got 3
an awkward
minutes.
spot. We've got 3 minutes left here.
Yeah. Should we just go to a new track and start on Clockwork Orange or?
Yeah. The dog, I'm fine. The dog is resting. Do you guys want to talk about Clockwork and Barry Lyndon or?
Oh yeah, whatever we can get through, I'd say.
I think we got a new tagline for Kubrick. Stanley Kubrick, the favorite director of dogs.
This conversation can serve no purpose anymore. Goodbye.